Well, welcome everyone to another Chatting with Chase, where I am just taking the time to interview some people from River's Edge so that you can get to know them better, so that I can get to know them better, and so we can just share some stories about life and everything that's going on. And today I get the incredible honor and privilege to interview Misty Church. What cooler name than Church, to be interviewing on our River's Edge Community Church podcast. That's not what it is, but Chatting with Chase episode. So thank you, Misty, for joining us. The starter question is real simple. In a minute or less, who is Misty Church for people that don't recognize your face?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Misty Church. I am a member at River's Edge Church, and I am also a single mom of two boys. They're 7 and 4, and I adore them. I love them dearly. I also am a teacher in the Waverly School District. I teach second grade, and I love kids. I love teaching, so it's really my passion. As a person, I'm also a traveler. I love to travel. I've gone overseas. I taught overseas, and I've been to South Africa, and I'd love to see every continent, if possible. So that's my goal. But when I can't travel, one of my favorite things to do is read books.
A reader. Awesome. Well, in my normal formatting, what I've been doing was trying to just see how this COVID-19 crisis has impacted people differently. But I'm done with that. I'm done with that formatting, and I just want to change some things up and ask some different questions. And so specifically, the reason why I'm starting the shift with Misty is I was really pumped. She shared a story on Facebook last week that I thought was so good that I was like, man, more people from our church need to hear this story. And it was kind of cool because we started a series a while ago. We're actually almost done with it, where we're talking about Christianity from the couch. And one of the things we talked about, I think in that first week, was how it's important for us to share our story with people, how God has impacted our life, how God has been faithful in our life, what God is doing, and how he's grown us or whatever. It's powerful when we share our story with people. And so that mixed with hearing her story, and I was like, man, let me just interview her and ask her to share that story again. And then if we have time, which I think we will, to share at least one other story, because Misty's got some really cool stories of how God has worked in her life, and they're awesome to hear, and they encourage me, inspire me. So I'm going to quit talking so that people can hear you talk and hear you share your story. So share us that story that you shared last week.
Sure. So the story I shared was, when you started this series, Christianity from the Couch, you had said you should share with people about how God's impacting your life. And so it was on my mind to make some videos and share that with people. And my first video I shared, I had a plan for what I was going to share for my first one. But in our Connect group, I had asked you, this is a few weeks later, we were talking about something different, but about like learning more about Jesus. And I had asked you, how could I do that? So you had recommended a book called Jesus Is. And before that group even ended, I was already like on Amazon ordering the book up and waiting for it to come. And so the day it came actually was the day I was going to make my first video, and it came on a Tuesday, and I had a chiropractor appointment. So I was already dressed, ready to go to the chiropractor, and something was like, I should put on my River's Edge shirt. I don't know what made me think it, but I literally went back in, changed into my River's Edge sweatshirt, and then I went to the chiropractor. And now the cool thing about it is that my chiropractor is a Christian. He runs a Christian practice, and that's one of the reasons that I picked him, because I think it's really, there's not a lot of people, there's not a lot of doctors and practitioners and business owners that run Christian businesses and like are public about it, So I thought that was really cool. So I went to my chiropractor, had my appointment, and I'm talking to him. I told him about how, like, I mentioned him in my Connect group, and and so then I go to leave, and on his counter, he has these books, and it's called Rediscover Jesus. And I thought, oh my goodness, if this is not God's plan for me right now to be thinking about and learning about Jesus. I mean, I have the book Rediscover Jesus, and the book Jesus is coming in the mail today. It was just like perfect timing, and I couldn't believe it. So that's the story I shared, because it's crazy how God knows what you need right when you need it and puts it there in your life, whether you're paying attention or not, right?
Yeah, that's the key. Are we paying attention or not? And my phone's trying to interrupt this, so sorry about that. So that's live. That's what we're doing. So the cool thing, another little cool piece that you had said is a little earlier, you had written something down in your journal. Share that, because that was a cool connection too.
Yeah, so the last week that we actually met at church in person, I was I was thinking about, I don't remember what you said during service that reminded me, but I wrote in my journal, God's way of living, live like Jesus. What does the Bible say about God's way of living? And it's like, then you start this series on Christianity from the couch. And it was like almost, how does this happen? How does God know exactly? And I literally wrote that in my journal.
Yeah, I love that. How does it look to live like Jesus? We start talking about Christianity from the couch, and early on in that, somewhere in there, we talked about, that we're called to live like Jesus lived. That's that's the new way of living that Christ came to give us, is to follow his example. So I love all that tie in, and how God's like, hey, let's figure out what that looks like. And so I love how he just does what he does. So we have some time for another really cool story that I've heard, maybe just once, but I love it. It's so cool about how you came to River's Edge. So if you wouldn't mind, Misty, kind of sharing that story about how you got here and kind of when that was, because I think you've been coming, man, how long has it been? And just kind of share that story. It's a really cool story. I think people would be encouraged by if you could share that with us.
Sure. I've been coming to River's Edge for about 2.5 years, I believe. I was figuring that out the other day. So how it happened was, I know I've been a Christian for most of my life. I was raised in a house, we talked about God, but we didn't really go to church. So I guess I didn't really become a Christian until high school. And but like since then, I have been Christian, and I have been to different churches and things like this. And I was working at Winans Elementary in the Waverly School District, and Carla Way, who's a member of the worship team, she was working there too. And she knew I was Christian. And anyway, one day we were having lunch in the teacher's lounge, and another teacher came in and said something. I cannot remember now what the teacher said or who it was, but she came in and Carla said, well, you should pray about that. And without even thinking, out of my mouth, I said, well, that would work if you believed in prayer. And Carla gave me this strange look, like, I thought you were Christian, aren't you Christian? And and then she said to me, well, I thought you were Christian. And I'm like, I am Christian. And she said, well, how can you be Christian and not believe in prayer? And I said to her, well, I guess it's not that I don't believe in prayer. It's that I feel like I've never needed or wanted anything bad enough to have to pray to God about it. Because like in the grand scheme of things, my problems and my needs are very minuscule, like compared to God, And she said, well, that's your problem. And I said, what's my problem? She said, well, you have a skewed view on prayer. You see, prayer is not just to ask God for things. Prayer is to grow your relationship with God. And wow, what hit me about that was that at the time I was going to this huge church with tons of people, and I really was not growing my relationship with God. And the crazy part is I had been feeling that in my heart, but I had tried to get connected, so I connected with like the children's wing, and I started volunteering, and I really did grow my relationship with the church and the people in it, but I didn't feel like I was moving in my relationship with God. So when she said that, I was like, whoa, that's how I'm going to grow my relationship with God. Okay. And she said, actually, you know what you should do? You should try my church. And I said, well, tell me about your church. She said, well, we have two pastors. One's a younger guy. He's kind of new and he's really funny, great to listen to. She said, and then we have another pastor. His name's Trent. And I stopped her. I was like, Trent? And she said, yeah. I said, Trent what? And she said, Trent Bushnell. Why? And well, what she didn't know was that in high school, how I got introduced to Christianity and Christ was through Trent. I was a member of Campus Life in high school, and I went on like mission trips with Campus Life to Florida, and like I went every week to group, and I was just like, are you serious? So she's like, yeah. So I'm like, okay. As if that's not enough, like that I've gone for full circle. I've left the country. I've left the state. I've tried different churches. And now here's my friend telling me to come to this church that the very first pastor I ever had is there, right? I mean, there's like 300 church. I know, right? But there's like 300 churches in Lansing or something. Yeah. And how random would it be that, I mean, it's not random, right? This is obviously planned, I think. So as if that's not enough convincing though. So I go to church and I'm like, okay, I'll try it. So I walk in, I find Carla. I'm like, she sits really close to the front, by the way. So I was a little nervous. so I go up and I'm like sitting there, and I cannot believe it, Chase, but you walked up and you are like, guess what, guys, we're starting a new series. And I'm like, okay, that's perfect timing. Like, she suggests this church where they're starting a new series is meant for me. And guess what the series was about? Prayer.
Prayer.
And I'm like, okay, if that's not
Yeah.
perfect timing, it's
Yeah.
just like crazy.
Prayer was that series we started, and so that was a couple of years ago, and that is just, I love that. I love the connection with Trent. I love this, you were talking about prayer, which is what this whole thing opened up, and then right then God's like, hey, let's talk about prayer and come to this church, and we'll start a series, and it'll be right there. So I love it. I think you said it so well in there, like, um crazy, right? Like that's, no, it's God. Like, and that's the cool thing, is sometimes what God does is crazy. Like when we look at it, we're like, there's no way, come on, that isn't true. And it's like, man, God does a great job of lining things up, and I love it. Both those stories just showing how God knows our needs and knows what we need it when we need it, and He has a way of orchestrating our life and leading our life to bring us to what we need. So I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. If we had time, I'd ask you to share more stories, but we don't have time. So if you're not friends with Misty Church, be your friend on Facebook. She's going to be putting out more stories on a regular basis, just sharing her story, and you can do the same. Misty, thank you so much for joining me and sharing a couple of those stories with us. I love it, and I'm inspired by it, and I know everyone listening will be inspired too. So thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, don't forget, we'll be doing this again next week, asking some more questions to more people so you can get to know more of us. And we miss you guys, miss seeing y'all in person, and tune in next week. Thanks, guys. We'll see you.